At 9:48 on a Friday night, an 84-year-old grandmother stepped out of her son-in-law's car, walked to her front door, and disappeared from the face of the earth. No goodbye, no warning, no trace. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, the doorbell camera had been tampered with, her pacemaker had gone silent, and blood matching her DNA was found on the front porch of her own home. This is the case of Nancy Ellen Guthrie, a retired schoolteacher, a devoted churchgoer, and the mother of one of the most recognized journalists in America. A woman who, by every account, lived a quiet, routine life in the sunlit foothills just north of Tucson, Arizona. A woman who should have been safe. But on the night of January 31st, 2026, someone came to her door, someone wearing a mask, someone carrying a handgun, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And as of right now, with the FBI offering a $100,000 reward, over 13,000 tips flooding in, ransom notes landing in newsrooms, and an entire community holding its breath, Nancy Ellen Guthrie has not been found. No arrest has been made, no suspect has been named, and the clock is still ticking. Welcome back to Criminal Crimes. This is the channel where we walk through active and unsolved cases with the respect they deserve. No speculation dressed up as fact, no sensationalism for clicks, just the verified details, the timeline, and the questions that still need answers. If you're new here, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss a case. And if you're returning, thank you. Your support keeps this work going. To understand why this case has gripped the nation, you need to understand who Nancy Ellen Guthrie is. Nancy was born in 1941. She spent the better part of her life doing what she loved, teaching. For decades, she stood in front of classrooms, shaping young minds, earning the kind of quiet respect that follows a person long after retirement. Those who knew her described her as warm, sharp, and deeply committed to her faith. After stepping away from teaching, Nancy settled into a peaceful routine in the Catalina Foothills, a residential community nestled against the Santa Catalina Mountains, just north of Tucson, Arizona. It's the kind of neighborhood where people know their neighbors, where the desert air is still, and where crime, frankly, doesn't make the news. Nancy attended church regularly. She kept up with her family. She took her daily medication that was critical, because Nancy had a heart condition that required a pacemaker. That device wasn't just medical hardware. It was connected to an app on her phone, transmitting data in real time, keeping her doctors informed and her family at ease. She was 84 years old. She lived alone. And she was the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the journalist and former co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, one of the most recognized faces in American morning television. That detail matters not because it changes the value of Nancy's life, because every missing person deserves this level of attention, but because it brought an immediate and intense media spotlight to a case that might otherwise have taken days or weeks to gain traction. And yet, even with that spotlight, even with federal resources, even with a nation watching, Nancy Ellen Guthrie is still missing. So what happened on the night of January 31st? Let's walk through the timeline. And I want to be clear, everything we're about to cover comes from verified law enforcement statements, official FBI releases, and confirmed reporting. Where something is unverified, we'll say so. Friday, January 31st, 2026. A normal evening by every measure. Nancy had spent time with family earlier that day. Her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, the husband of Savannah Guthrie, drove her home that evening. At exactly 9:48 p.m., he dropped her off at her residence in the Catalina Foothills. Nancy stepped out of the vehicle, walked to her front door, and went inside. That is the last confirmed sighting of Nancy Ellen Guthrie. Nothing about the drop-off raised concern, no unusual behavior, no sign of distress, just a grandmother returning home after a family visit. But sometime between that moment and the early hours of February 1st, something went terribly wrong. Here's what investigators have been able to piece together. At 1:47 a.m., roughly 4 hours after Nancy entered her home, her doorbell camera captured footage of a figure approaching her front door. The individual was wearing a mask, dark clothing, and was carrying what appeared to be a black backpack. Investigators later identified the bag as a 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker pack, a budget backpack sold exclusively at Walmart. The figure also appeared to have a handgun holster visible on their person. The footage shows this individual tampering with the doorbell camera. Shortly after, the device was disconnected. Now here's a critical detail, and this is where it gets frustrating. Nancy did not have a paid subscription to Google Nest's cloud storage service. That means the footage from her doorbell camera was not automatically saved or accessible to her family or to investigators. The FBI had to work directly with Google to recover the footage from back-end servers. That process took time that, in a case like this, is everything. This is worth pausing on. A lot of people assume their doorbell cameras are always recording and always saving. But many smart home camera systems, including Google Nest, require a paid subscription to store footage in the cloud. Without it, you may only get limited access or, in some cases, no access at all after the fact. It's a detail worth checking in your own setup because in a situation like this, that footage can be the difference between a lead and a dead end. Back to the timeline. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's Pacemaker app disconnected. The device had been transmitting data in real time, monitoring her heart, syncing with her phone. And then, without explanation, it stopped. That disconnection is significant. A pacemaker doesn't just go offline on its own. Either the phone was powered down, moved out of range, destroyed, or something happened to Nancy herself. The next morning, Saturday, February 1st, Nancy was expected to join a virtual church service. She didn't log on. That was unusual. Nancy was consistent. She didn't miss church. By midday, family members who had been unable to reach her went to the home to check on her. What they found set everything in motion. When family members arrived at Nancy's home on the afternoon of February 1st, the signs of trouble were immediate. Nancy was not there. Her car was still in the driveway. Her phone was inside the home, her wallet untouched. Her daily medication, the medication she needed for her heart condition, was sitting right where it always was. Nothing had been packed. Nothing suggested she had left voluntarily. An 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker does not walk away from her medication. She does not leave her phone behind. She does not abandon her vehicle in the driveway and vanish into the Arizona desert in the middle of the night. Something happened inside or just outside that home, and the evidence confirmed it. Investigators found blood on the front porch. It was tested. It matched Nancy's DNA. That single detail shifted the entire nature of this case. This was not a wandering elderly woman. This was not a voluntary disappearance. Something violent had occurred at that front door, the same door where, hours earlier, a masked figure had been captured on camera. But the blood on the porch wasn't the only physical evidence recovered. Multiple discarded gloves were found in the area surrounding the home. One of those gloves contained DNA. And according to investigators, that DNA appears to match the gloves worn by the individual seen in the doorbell camera footage. As of the latest reporting, that DNA is still undergoing formal testing, but the preliminary connection between the gloves, the footage, and the suspect is one of the strongest physical leads in this case. When investigators recover items like gloves, masks, or clothing from a scene, they're not just looking for fingerprints. Skin cells, sweat, and saliva can all leave behind what's known as touch DNA. Even brief contact with an object can deposit enough genetic material to build a profile. In cases like this, where the suspect took steps to conceal their identity, discarded items become critical because the very thing used to hide evidence can become evidence itself. Now let's talk about what else the scene told investigators. The doorbell camera had been deliberately disconnected. The Pacemaker app had gone offline at 2:28 a.m. Nancy's belongings were untouched, and blood was found at the point of entry. Taken together, this paints a picture of someone who came prepared, someone who knew about the camera, someone who acted in the dead of night, and someone who left behind just enough to confirm that Nancy did not leave that home on her own terms. So who was the figure on camera? Let's go back to that doorbell camera footage, the footage the FBI had to recover directly from Google's back-end servers because Nancy didn't have a paid Nest subscription. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, a figure appeared at Nancy's front door. Masked, dark clothing, deliberate movements. This was not someone who stumbled onto the wrong porch. This was not a neighbor. This was someone who came with a purpose. The FBI released images from that footage publicly, and the details they pulled from it are worth breaking down. The individual is described as male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10", with an average build. He was wearing a mask that concealed his face entirely. On his back, he carried a black backpack, and on his person, a handgun holster was visible. Now, the backpack. Investigators didn't just identify it as a generic bag. The FBI constructed a blackout tent replicating the nighttime lighting conditions captured by the camera and used reflections and visual markers in the footage to identify the exact make and model. It was a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. That bag is sold exclusively at Walmart. It's a budget item, widely available, the kind of thing you could buy with cash at any location in the country and never leave a digital footprint. This technique, reconstructing environmental conditions to extract details from surveillance footage, is more common than most people realize. The FBI's forensic imaging units can enhance, isolate, and cross-reference visual data from even low-resolution cameras. In this case, by replicating the exact lighting conditions of the original footage, they were able to identify brand-specific details on the backpack that would have been invisible under normal review. It's a reminder that even grainy footage can hold answers if the right tools are applied. Back to the figure. The footage shows him approaching the door and tampering with the camera. Shortly after, the device went offline, and within the next hour, Nancy's Pacemaker app disconnected. The sequence is difficult to ignore. A masked individual arrives, the camera is disabled, the pacemaker goes dark, and by morning, Nancy is gone, her blood left behind on the porch. Law enforcement has not publicly named a suspect, but the physical description, the DNA from the discarded gloves, and the footage itself form the clearest profile investigators have to work with. And then came the ransom notes. In the days following Nancy's disappearance, something unusual began happening. Ransom notes started arriving not to the family directly, but to media outlets. Multiple newsrooms received communications claiming knowledge of Nancy's whereabouts. Some demanded payment. Some demanded millions in Bitcoin. Deadlines were set, and in every single instance, those deadlines passed without any proof of life being provided. TMZ received an email from someone claiming to know the identity of the kidnapper. The sender demanded the FBI's reward money be paid in Bitcoin. Other outlets received similar messages, varying in tone, varying in detail, but all sharing one thing in common: none of them could be verified. This is where we need to be careful, and this is where this channel draws a hard line. Unverified ransom notes are not evidence. They are not confirmation of a kidnapping. They are not proof that Nancy is alive or that the sender has any connection to her disappearance. In high-profile cases like this, false claims flood in. People looking for attention, people looking for money, people who see a vulnerable family and an open wound and decide to exploit it. And that's exactly what happened here. A California man named Derek Colella was arrested and charged with sending a hoax ransom message related to Nancy's case. He had no connection to the disappearance. He had no information. He simply saw an opportunity and took it, and in doing so, he wasted investigative resources and added pain to a family already in crisis. In major missing persons cases, law enforcement is often overwhelmed by the volume of incoming tips, and a significant percentage of those tips are false, misleading, or deliberately fabricated. The FBI has reported receiving over 13,000 tips in this case alone. Every single one has to be assessed, categorized, and either pursued or dismissed. Hoax communications don't just waste time, they can actively divert attention from legitimate leads. Filing a false report or sending a hoax ransom demand is a federal offense, and as this case demonstrates, people are being held accountable. Despite the noise, the family responded with grace. Savannah Guthrie made a public statement direct, emotional, and unmistakable. She addressed whoever was responsible and said simply, "We will pay." A mother asking for her mother back. No conditions. No hesitation. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation around Nancy's disappearance expanded rapidly, pulling in federal resources, advanced technology, and an increasingly wide net of scrutiny. The FBI took a central role early on. The reward for information was doubled to $100,000. Agents began canvassing the area, requesting surveillance footage from every resident within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's home. Any recording captured between January 1st and February 2nd, 2026. They weren't just looking at the night she disappeared. They were looking for patterns. Someone watching, someone waiting, someone who had been there before. The crime scene itself was processed multiple times. According to reporting from the New York Times, the scene at Nancy's home was closed and reopened on more than one occasion, suggesting that investigators were either recovering new evidence or re-examining existing findings with fresh eyes and additional tools. A search warrant was executed at a residence near Nancy's home. 2 individuals were removed from the property, but no arrests were made. A man was detained following a traffic stop and identified as a person of interest. He was questioned and released within hours. As of now, no one has been formally named as a suspect. Behind the scenes, the technology being deployed tells its own story. The FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, known as CAST, is reportedly involved in the investigation. This unit specializes in analyzing cellular data to map movement patterns, identifying which phones were in a given area at a given time. If the suspect carried a device anywhere near Nancy's home that night, CAST may be able to trace it. Cell tower data mapping is one of the most powerful tools in modern investigations. Every time a phone connects to a tower, whether through a call, a text, or even a background app refresh, it leaves a digital record. By collecting data from towers surrounding a crime scene, investigators can build a picture of every device that passed through the area within a specific window. It doesn't give you a name immediately, but it gives you a trail. And trails lead somewhere. And then there's the Pacemaker. Investigators deployed high-tech Bluetooth scanners, mounted on helicopters, to search for the signal from Nancy's pacemaker. That device, even if separated from her phone, could still emit a detectable Bluetooth signal. The fact that aerial resources were committed to tracking that signal tells you 2 things: investigators believe the pacemaker may still be intact, and they are leaving nothing to the table. But even with all of this, the footage, the DNA, the cellular analysis, the aerial searches, one critical tension has emerged within the investigation itself. No case of this magnitude moves without complications. But what's been reported here goes beyond the usual friction between agencies. According to Fox News, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos has reportedly been at odds with the FBI over the handling of key evidence. Specifically, the Sheriff's Department has insisted on using a private forensic lab in Florida to process critical evidence rather than the FBI's own National Crime Laboratory. Let's sit with that for a moment. The FBI operates one of the most advanced forensic laboratories in the world. It is the standard. It is where evidence in federal cases is processed, tested, and verified to the highest degree. And in a case involving a missing 84-year-old woman, a case with national attention, federal involvement, and a $100,000 reward on the line, the local sheriff's office is reportedly directing evidence to a private lab instead. No official explanation has been given for this decision. We don't know the name of the lab. We don't know what specific evidence is being sent there. And we don't know whether this has caused any measurable delay in the investigation. But here's what we do know. In cases like this, time is not neutral. Every hour matters. Every day that passes without an arrest is a day the trail gets colder. And when the 2 primary agencies working a case are not aligned on something as fundamental as where the evidence gets processed, that's a problem. We're not here to assign blame. We're not here to speculate on motives or internal politics. But this is a verified detail that has been publicly reported, and it's part of the picture. If you're following this case, it's something worth watching, because at the end of the day, the evidence is what will solve this. The DNA from those gloves, the footage from that camera, whatever was recovered from inside that home, it all has to be processed. It all has to hold up, and it all has to lead somewhere. And while the agencies navigate that tension, a family is still waiting. Through all of this, the headlines, the false ransom notes, the investigative friction, the silence, one thing has remained constant: a family refusing to stop. Savannah Guthrie has stepped into a role no daughter should ever have to fill. She has stood in front of cameras not as a journalist this time, but as a daughter, and pleaded for her mother's return. Her words have been measured but unmistakable. Direct, raw, the kind of words that come from a place beyond composure. We will pay. That statement wasn't a negotiation tactic. It wasn't a media strategy. It was a daughter telling whoever took her mother that nothing else matters. Not the money, not the conditions. Just bring her home. The family has cooperated fully with law enforcement. They have made themselves available to the media not for attention, but for reach. Every interview, every public appearance, every statement has served one purpose: keeping Nancy's face in front of the public, keeping her name in the conversation. Because in missing persons cases, public awareness isn't just helpful, it's essential. And the public has responded. Over 13,000 tips have been submitted to the FBI. The community in the Catalina Foothills has rallied. Neighbors have turned over footage. Residents have come forward. The response has been overwhelming in volume, even if it hasn't yet produced the one tip that breaks this open. But that's the nature of these cases. It only takes one person who saw something, one detail that didn't seem important at the time, one connection that hasn't been made yet. And until that moment comes, the family waits. Not quietly, not passively, but with the kind of relentless, visible, unwavering presence that says we are not going anywhere. So where does this case stand right now? Nancy Ellen Guthrie has been missing since January 31st, 2026. As of today, no arrest has been made. No suspect has been publicly named. The FBI's reward stands at $100,000 for information leading to her recovery. Here's what we know. A masked individual approached her home at 1:47 a.m. The doorbell camera was tampered with. Her pacemaker went offline at 2:28 a.m. Blood matching her DNA was found on her front porch. Discarded gloves with DNA potentially linking them to the figure on camera were recovered nearby. Her phone, wallet, car, and medication were all left behind. Here's what we don't know: who the masked figure is, where Nancy is right now, whether she is still alive, and why. Why her? Why that night? Why that home? Those are the questions that remain open. And until they're answered, this case stays active on this channel and in the minds of everyone following it. If you have any information, anything at all related to the disappearance of Nancy Ellen Guthrie, contact the FBI's tip line. The number and submission links will be in the description below. You don't have to be certain. You don't have to have the full picture. Sometimes the smallest detail is the one that changes everything. If this case resonated with you, subscribe to Criminal Crimes and turn on notifications. We cover active and unsolved cases with the care and accuracy they deserve. No sensationalism. No speculation passed off as truth. Just the facts, the timeline, and the questions that still need answers. Share this video, not for the algorithm, but because someone watching might know something. Someone in Tucson. Someone near the Catalina Foothills. Someone who was driving through that neighborhood on the night of January 31st. Visibility is the most powerful tool a missing persons case can have. Nancy Ellen Guthrie is someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's friend. She deserves to be found. We'll update this case as new information becomes available. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next one.